Bamboland, back from Birmingham. Bamboland, way down in Alabama. Bamboland, where she shake that thing. Bamboland, boy, she makes me sing. Bamboland, oh, Black Betty. Bamboland, oh, Black Betty. Bamboland.
I'm addicted to stress, that's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long. And I hang around like a bum, and I think I'm going nowhere, and that makes me nervous. I'm addicted to stress, it's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long. And I hang around like a bum, I think I'm going nowhere, and that makes me nervous. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me.
It's the little things that get you, it's the little things that get you when you weren't paying attention. It's the little things that get you, it's the little things that get you.
I'm trying to cut down on my caffeine consumption, so when I get up, I just have one cup of coffee, and I like to have another cup of coffee with my breakfast. And on the way to work, I like to get a cup of coffee, like the kind of cup of coffee that you get with the donuts. If I never get the donut, I just have the cup of coffee. And when I get to work, I like to have a cup of coffee, because I like to have a coffee when I'm talking on the phone. But it usually goes cold, and I need to get another cup of coffee, and it's lunch, and I have an espresso. And when I get back, it's not morning anymore, so I have a Diet Cola and another Diet Cola, and by then I'm feeling fine, and I'm feeling pretty sharp, and I'm feeling pretty wired, and I'm getting things done. But right about 2, I get this little tiny migraine, and it starts behind my eyes, and it moves to the back of my neck, and it moves to the bottom of my spine, but it doesn't get there till 5 or 6 o'clock, which is the end of the day, so I'm fine, so I'm fine, so I'm fine. Except when I have to work late, which I usually do. I'm addicted to stress, that's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long. And I hang around like a bum, and I think I'm going nowhere, and that makes me nervous. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me.
It's the little things that get you, it's the little things that get you when you weren't paying attention. It's the little things that get you, it's the little things that get you, it's the little things that get you when you weren't paying attention.
I love to work, I love to run, I love to play real hard. I love to steal little things from the grocery store, like a piece of bubble gum, or sometimes I just stick my thumb in a peach and leave it there. I love to work, I love to run, I love to water ski, snowboard, jet ski, skydive, parasail, hang glide, rollerblade, mountain bike, bungee jump. Well, I mean, I love to do these things if I ever have the time. I love to work, I love to work, I love to work out after work. I love to spend a little time with this woman that I'm seeing, so we never really get a little time to spend together. So we call each other up and we talk about work. But what I think I really love is to get up by myself on a little tiny island in the middle of the ocean with just me, a book, and a cellular phone, and a personal computer in case something came up. And I'd eat, and I'd drink, and I'd run, and I'd sleep, and I wouldn't do nothing except swim all day. Except I don't know how to do laps in the ocean. Where are the sharks? Where are the sharks? And there's this kind of anemone that sticks in your foot, and the poison goes up to your brain, and you die. And sand fleas, yuck! But actually, I think it'd be really relaxing, just me by myself in the middle of the ocean, and that's what I'd really love to do more than anything else. Except I probably hate it. I'm addicted to stress, that's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long, and I hang around like a bum, and I think I'm going nowhere, and that makes me nervous. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me. Everybody's thinking about me.
Bon locale, memoirs. Bon locale, and welcome to 7 at 7 with me, Sevy Rose, the least watched name in news. Yeah, we got a pretty good show for you today. I'm just gonna start off rambling about a couple weird things. First off, I have actually gone to the fucking doctors, and of course, it's completely inconclusive. They are gonna have to run more tests. Unfortunately, due to the way American medical systems work, I have to find a family clinic that works with people who don't. Let me recenter myself just a wee bit. I had to find a family clinic that works with people who don't have insurance, as I don't have insurance right now. But I am on the road to getting there, and it came because the tumor in my throat is actually starting to push on the side of my esophagus, and it's genuinely uncomfortable. It makes me very anxious. I don't like the feeling of suffocation. But, you know, enough about me. We've got a lot of shit to go through today. There were so many stories that I wanted to cover this week. And I can't get through all of them, so we've actually got 9 articles we're going to go through. And the first of which is actually a redaction, but not a complete redaction. Many of you, if you watch Sargon of Akkad, you may have seen a video about something that I talked about a couple weeks ago from a site called Medusa Magazine. Now, I was, utterly shocked by the content of Medusa Magazine. I'm surprised I didn't realize that the whole thing was a fucking Poe. Oh, LT, do you want to come say hi? Come say hi right quick. Yeah, here's our baby. Here's our baby. Mwah. Alright, watch out. But yeah, I got fucking trolled. I got trolled good, because I thought it was completely serious. However, so did a lot of other people. Let me just show you this article right quick, rather. This post made by Medusa Magazine, or rather should I say, Age of Shitlords, coming clean about them succumbing to Poe's law. I created Medusa Magazine, and I am shutting it down because feminist stupidity has surpassed satire. This is fucking hilarious. And of course, here's the post from Facebook. One of these days, I'm going to start a feminist website. I'll get a couple shitlords together, and we'll write tons of satirical articles. And I fell for one. What can I say? I fucked up. But I honestly wasn't able to find any, background on this. I didn't even know who Age of Shitlords was until Sargon brought it to people's attention. Hello, readers of Medusa Magazine. My name is Redacted, and I own ageofshitlords.com. Before I begin, I want to state that yes, this website is satire. It has always been and always will be satire, but I don't blame anyone for thinking otherwise. Myself and the fellow shitposters who operated and published articles on this website while it lasted pride ourselves on writing fairly believable satire with just enough retardation to keep our readers in constant doubt. This has been fun, but all good things have to come to an end. I am shutting down this website because recent events have proven to us that it is no longer possible to satirize the feminist left. To prove that this was a hoax all along, a couple of months ago, when I first got the idea for this website, I posted about it on my Facebook page. The post is still visible on Facebook today. One of these days, I'm going to start a feminist website. I'll get a couple shitlords together and we'll write tons of satirical articles, but from a feminist perspective, to make the site look more believable. It will be the ultimate social experiment. To see how long it will take the feminists who follow us and the anti-feminists who oppose us to realize that it is all a big joke. Well, you fucking got me, Age of Shitlords. You got me good. And I am very thankful, because, my god, when I saw Sargon put up a video with the Medusa Magazine logo in it, I was like, oh shit, what have I done? And I was laughing for like 5 straight minutes about the whole thing. Skipping ahead, but while everyone else was falling for our satirical articles, others weren't buying it. Some of Reddit's Kotaku and Action subreddit took upon themselves to investigate and prove that the website was indeed owned by the same people operating Age of Shitlords. Also, a special hat tip to the nosy writer of the blog Why Evolution is True, who kept pestering and gathering information to prove this site was indeed a parody. But then again, they were only able to come to the conclusion due to my own personal clumsiness. As a general, hold on, I missed a paragraph, I'm sorry. Our articles have been featured in several media publications like InfoWars, The Federalist, The Gateway Pundit, and several other websites that fell for our prank, including the Russian website that covered our article called White Abortions, as proof of how politically correct the West has become. As a general principle and for security reasons, I always use a fake name and identity when buying a domain name online. I just so happened to use the same fake name to buy MedusaMagazine.com as I had used to buy AgeOfShitlords.com a year ago. But tish. The rest of the deduction was easy from there. Skipping ahead a little bit more, but back to the original topic, we are shutting down our rather hilarious project because we can no longer compete with our competition. we have come to realize that our competition is not other satirical websites, but rather the people we are trying to satirize. About a week ago, after a short hiatus from the website and in light of sexual assault allegations currently afflicting Hollywood, we put another article titled, "Why We Should Believe Women Who Accuse Right-Wingers of Rape More Than Those Who Accuse Liberals." The very article I covered on this show either last week or the week prior. I can't recall offhand. The article is a total caricature intended to be as ridiculous as possible, basically arguing that because liberals are good people, we should forgive them when they rape women. We thought no one in the world could possibly hold views as ridiculous as that, so we wrote it as satire and published it. So imagine our surprise when an actual feminist and self-proclaimed expert on rape culture wrote an article for the Washington Post, no less, using the same rationale and reasoning as our satirical article that was written just a few days before. I'm a feminist, I study rape culture, and I don't want Al Franken to resign. This article and all of the things that follow are real. I wasn't the only one who took it seriously. People on the left took it so seriously that they began making the exact same argument. It would feel good, momentarily, to see Franken resign and the Democratic governor of Minnesota, Mark Dayton, appoint a senator who has not, as far as we know, harmed women. If I believed for one second that Franken is the only Democrat in the Senate who has done something like this, with or without photographic evidence, I would see it as the best and most appropriate option. But in the world we actually live in, I'm betting that there will be more. And more after that. And they won't all come from the states with Democratic governors and a deep bench of progressive replacements. Some will, if ousted, have their successors chosen by Republicans. 1. Kate Harding has no fucking idea how special elections work. Just because a person is nominated doesn't mean they're going to win the special election. And you don't have to be nominated by anyone to run in a special election. In other words, if we set this precedent in the interest of demonstrating our party's solidarity with harassed and abused women, we're only going to drain the swamp of people who, however flawed, still regularly vote to protect women's rights and freedoms. The legislative branch will remain a chock-a-block with old white Republican men who regard women chiefly as sex objects and unpaid housekeepers, and will show them how staunchly Democrats oppose their misogynistic attitudes by handing them out more power. My fucking God, did you hear that? This woman is actively promoting ignoring the crimes, and a lot of them are crimes, of Democratic senators because she's afraid of losing even more power in the House and Senate. This is how far they're willing to go. However, she may have actually stumbled on something very important there. And that is that when it all comes down to it, politics is who you vote for and what they vote for. It has nothing to do with what the person has actually done. Otherwise, Bill Clinton would not be as popular as he is today. With the number of rape allegations, including those which are true, on Bill Clinton's plate, he should be completely disowned by the left. However, they won't. And this continuing on, and this batshit insane feminist isn't alone in her thinking. Others seem to share her views on the topic. Chief political analyst ABC News describes why liberals are allowed to sexually harass whomever they want and conservatives aren't. Matthew Dowd says, "Every leader and each of us is human and flawed and makes mistakes. But there's a difference between those who are flawed, who work for the common good, and those who are flawed who could care less about the common good. Huge difference." This is the beginning of the end for virtue signaling. It really fucking is. If you can't admit that you're wrong or that you're supporting a large problem, then this is where we are. Virtue signaling is going to lose all of its value, and we're going to find ourselves again in a position where it actually matters what a person does in the Senate. I hate to say it, but Medusa magazine has done a great amount of good with its satire, because it's forcing all of these news outlets, all of these important narrative makers, to acknowledge that they're making their own bed with the crimes they try and fight. If you haven't read our Believe Liberal Victims or Rape More Than Conservatives, Believe Liberal Victims of Rape More Than Conservative Victims of Rape article yet, I implore you to go read it now and then compare it to the argument these rape activists are now pushing. It is likely they read our little hoax, agreed with it, and then decided to incorporate it into their movement. And of course, if you want to, I did do a full read of that article and quite a little speech on it in the last video. So if you want to get all that information, as well as see how stupid I was to fall for this Poe, do go back and watch last week's episode. I do think you'll enjoy it. It was a pretty good episode. But we are actually going to drop right into a couple pieces of news that I feel are very important to start with. First and foremost, the firm behind the dubious Trump-Russia dossier paid multiple journalists for work. Now, if you've been following me for some time, you've heard me speak a lot about the Russia dossier, the Trump-Russia dossier. And that story, the Russia hoax, as I've been frequently calling it, is the largest distraction when it comes to politics. And Fusion GPS was very much at the center of orchestrating it. And we are reaching a point in which it is impossible to deny that Fusion GPS has essentially lied and then paid journalists in order to promote that lie, to promote that narrative. So let's get into it. Fusion GPS, the liberal research firm that funded and distributed the anti-Trump dossier, has paid 3 journalists for work related to Congress's Russia probe, according to court filings. Lawyers representing the House Intelligence Committee made an assertion in a bid to force Fusion to turn over additional bank transactions involving reporters, law firms, and a media company. I'll give you a hint. That media company rhymes with BNN. The committee seeks transactions related to 3 individual journalists, stated the House General Counsel court filing, each of whom have reported on or been quoted in articles regarding topics related to the committee's investigation. The journalists' names are blacked out. Documents list 10 House-demanded bank transactions from Fusion, or its conduits, to journalists. Now, for those of you who don't know, that is essentially collusion, and they could be in huge trouble. They could be brought before a grand jury, if not before a Senate hearing committee. And this entire thing will begin to fall apart piece by piece. Fusion's 2 law firms, Cunningham, Levy Muse, and Zuckerman Spader and Cunningham, are asking a U.S. District Court judge to block access. The court battle unfolded this way. Congressional committees are conducting broad probes into Russia's 2016 election interference and whether President Trump and his associates colluded. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, California Republican, signed a subpoena for Fusion's bank records. He wanted to determine who bankrolled a partisan, unproven dossier that has become a large part of the FBI's, Congress's, and journalists' investigations. The Nunes subpoena forced the law firm Perkins Coie to admit that the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton campaign paid the bills. The money went from Democrats to Perkins Coie to Fusion to ex-British spy Christopher Steele. He then paid Kremlin sources for dirt on Mr. Trump. None of Mr. Steele's court charges of collusion have been publicly confirmed. But they will be, probably around the beginning of the year, when Congress is back in session. Of course, right now, Congress is so far behind due to Democrats doing everything in their power to bring our government to a screeching halt in the halls of Congress, that it's very unlikely we will see the end of this immediately. We are going to have to wait because there are far more important things, including something I'm going to be talking about in the show later, the tax and budget bills, which are currently working through the House and are going to genuinely upend our country from where it's been for the last 23 years, since the beginning of Bill Clinton's second term. Fusion and the House at first worked out a deal for relevant bank records, but House lawyers say that they learned that Fusion withheld 112 transactions pertinent to the Russia probe. And by the way, if this isn't coming across clearly enough, it was the Democrats and the DNC who colluded with Russia by working through a former spy from the UK. The suspect transactions, House lawyers say, deal with two Russia issues. One is the dossier. The other is Fusion's payments from another law firm, Baker Hostetler. The money came from the Russian firm Prevezon Holdings, which is lobbying Washington to repeal a law that brought stiff economic sanctions on Vladimir Putin's regime. In that vein, the House committee wants copies of Fusion bank transfers with other law firms in addition to Perkins Coie and Hostetler. Fusion has established a pattern and practice of using law firms as intermediaries to mask the true beneficiaries of its research, the House filing says. In addition, the committee wants transactions related to the Washington Free Beacon, a conservative news site funded by GOP megadonor Paul Singer. Or Singer, I can't remember how it's said. But the Beacon first hired Fusion in 2015 to investigate then-candidate Donald Trump, an anathema to many D.C. establishment Republicans. The Free Beacon says that payments stopped in April 2016. Fusion then sought funds from the Democrats. After the Democratic National Committee announced on June 22, 2016, that Russia had hacked its computer network, a lie, as it was an inside job, which had at least direct involvement with Seth Rich. And if you don't know who Seth Rich is, again, you might want to go look that up because that was another story I've worked on for like the last year. Fusion hired Mr. Steele to prove there was a Trump-Putin conspiracy. The House filing stated the committee has a clear investigative interest in scrutinizing Beacon's public claims regarding its relationship with Fusion GPS. Now, Washington Free Beacon isn't a reputable source. They've repeatedly been shown to take funding from both sides of the aisle, and they present themselves as partisan, but are in fact partisan in the very opposite direction. The only thing they have in common with the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee is a disturbing level of authoritarianism. They want to contain and maintain the power which they've held. And the last thing, they want the Republicans to retain power, they want the corporatist Republicans to retain power, and the last thing they wanted was Donald Trump to come into the White House, until the day he actually entered the White House, in which their story rapidly changed. They're one of the reasons I've never used them as source, because they're not actually of any value. Not even to make fun of. It's just a shitty website. House attorneys argued The attorneys asserted that Fusion enjoys a First Amendment right to associate freely with clients and contractors on political and other matters, and a First Amendment right to engage in those client activities when they further political and commercial speech. However, the House attorneys argued Fusion has no such rights. Instead of a profit-maximizing hired gun, selling it investigative services to the highest bidder, they said, Fusion's goal, to be highly compensated for his work, is not a protected associational interest. Fusion's co-founder, Glenn Simpson, a former Wall Street Journal reporter, had Mr. Steele brief a number of liberal press sites in Washington during the election. The House court filings mentioned, too, who wrote down stories on Dossier Dirt, Yahoo News, and Mother Jones. Fusion's specialty is seeding its opposition research into news stories, a modus operandi highlighted by a 2011 interview with co-founder Peter Fritsch. The House attorney said, Mr. Fritsch is also a former Wall Street Journal reporter. BuzzFeed posted the entire 35-page dossier in January 2017. The House Intelligence Committee Democrats have used the document to recite unverified allegations against Mr. Trump and his team. So where are we then with the Trump-Russia dossier and the Russia hoax? Well, every few weeks we are receiving information that less and less of the actual Republicans in power have used that power in any sort of way to collude with Russia. Much to the contrary, even Jared Kushner, who was under investigation under Robert Mueller's investigation into the Russia hoax, is in trouble not for colluding with Russia, but rather colluding with Israel. And of course, his collusions with Israel have put him in hot water. However, I cut that story because I didn't really have the time to go into reading that entire article. But it's worth saying that what we're starting to see here is the dissolution of a lot of the lies that have been running around for the last 2.5, 3 years, both regarding Russia, Trump, as well as regarding Hillary Clinton and her team. All of these things that are slowly coming to light, whether it be the Democratic involvement with English spies to dig up dirt on Russia, on Trump, from Russia, rather, to the House Intelligence Committee actively pursuing charges of collusion and there's a few other charges I can't recall offhand, I apologize, against these groups, as well as further investigations into Fusion GPS and everyone whom they worked with on either side of the aisle, really is what Trump was running his campaign on, wasn't it? This is an amazing time, because what we're seeing is a slow breakdown of what he called the swamp. We're draining the swamp, people, and it's absolutely fucking beautiful. I really wanted to cover this story because, I mean, you don't actually get to hear the important names very often, and the Washington Times was very clear in stating Fusion GPS, as well as the involvement of the Washington Free Beacon, Christopher Steele, Paul Singer, a lot of these big names. And of course, if you want Perkins Coie, there was the two law firms whose names I skipped over, Cunningham, Levy, Muse, and Zuckerman, Spader, and Cunningham. So these are all groups that are going to be in serious fucking hot water, and I highly doubt that they're connected with anyone. They're not connected with anyone else. In fact, I suspect we're going to be learning quite a lot more in the coming months. Of course, it is unfortunate that it will take that long, because there is still a lot of fucking swamp to wade through. I think I'm actually going to head into the swamp for a moment before I get to the Adpocalypse story, because it's actually really important to cover just the walls that stand before us. Where's that article? Yeah. The tax and budget bills is where we're going to be going next. And I apologize if I'm going pretty fast. However, it's, honestly been a really rough week for me. And I don't have anything written down. I am literally just giving you guys this shit off the cuff. But I've got two stories here relating to what people are calling the Mulvaney budget. With the, and I'll cover why it's called that in just a moment. But here is the Mick Mulvaney budget hitting the Hill. It may be Trump's proposal, but his first fiscal blueprint reflects the vision of House Freedom Caucus co-founder, and the president has left the sales job to him. This, of course, is coming from The Atlantic. The budget proposal the White House will deliver to Congress on Tuesday, this is a very old article, by the way. This is from May 23rd, 2017, but it gives us a lot of backstory to the story I'm going to be getting to next, which is about specifically how this tax bill is going to be used to disable the welfare state that Bill Clinton helped create. However, might carry Donald Trump's name, but it reflects Mick Mulvaney's fiscal vision. The president has been uncharacteristically quiet on the most expansive policy statement of his young administration, ceding responsibility both for its substance and message to his staunchly conservative budget director. And Mulvaney has certainly run with the assignment. The former congressional spending hawk has affixed the presidential seal to a wish list of ideological budget cuts to the State Department, EPA, the social safety net, by which they mean the Bill Clinton welfare system, among many others, that only a few years ago have been marginalized even in the Republican-led House. This is, I think, the first time in a long time that an administration has written a budget through the eyes of the people who are actually paying the taxes, Mulvaney told reporters on Monday, by way of explaining the budget's core philosophy, which he described more succinctly as taxpayer first. Too often in Washington, we only look at the recipient side. How does the budget affect either those who receive or don't receive benefits? That perspective is familiar to members of the House Freedom Caucus, the hardline group that Mulvaney co-founded as a congressman from South Carolina. But it is less familiar as an argument coming from Trump, who memorably differentiated himself from his Republican presidential rivals by vowing to protect the entitlement programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, none of which are actually under attack right now, notably. They had proposed to cut over time. He was a big government conservatism, and many voters who had scorned this fiscal security of Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan in 2012 had backed Trump last fall. The result is a document that, whether by intent or simple necessity, looks a lot like Mulvaney's proposal, more like Mulvaney's proposal than Trump's. This definitely is a Mulvaney budget, said former House Representative David Jolly, a Florida Republican who has frequently criticized Trump since leaving the Congress in January. No question, because I don't believe the president understands the finer details of what he himself is submitting to the Congress. But a Mulvaney budget will never pass the Senate. However, we are now in 6 months later, almost to the day, actually. It is, the 25th? Yeah, 2 days off, 6 months from when this article was penned. And about, what's today, Saturday? 4 days away from the actual submission in Congress. And the more we look at it, the more we can realize that what we're going to be seeing is Trump's tax plan being pushed through now that the Democrats are completely unable to filibuster their way to a stalled victory. This is a very important point to make. The budget that is being brought forth is a huge slash in a lot of places, and of course, a boon to other places. For example, our defense spending is going to go up by $54 billion, and that $54 billion is dedicated specifically to building the wall along our southern border, a subject that no news outlet wants to cover whatsoever. And in other ways, it's quite the machete taken to programs developed under Carter as well as Bill Clinton. And those programs are specifically the movement of food stamps and later cash assistance from the federal government to stipends given to the states by the federal government at the state's discretion. However, the state's discretion is not the only thing on the table. If the welfare program as it is right now is a bludgeon to be used against the states. If a state does not play along in one way or another, finances can actually be cut by the federal government, given to the states, thereby affecting those who are dependent on those benefits. And on the same flip of the coin, the Bill Clinton welfare system was designed essentially to allow almost anyone under a certain economic level to be able to receive, in the very least, food stamps, a stipend of between $150 and $192 per month, specifically for groceries, with the exception of things like coffee, in some states Coca-Cola, items that are often purchased in order for resale value. And this program is now under direct attack, thank fucking God, because, well, let's face it, college students, people who actively receive loans and grants and money from the state of California and the federal government, are also receiving food stamps and support from food stamp SNAP program controlled food banks in the state of California. It's utterly disturbing because these aren't the people who need it most. These are fucking college students. And yet, here we are with, well, I can't get food stamps, and I don't make I make $350 off Patreon every month right now. I don't know the exact number. I haven't checked in a while. And I'm ineligible. I barely make $4,000 a year right now doing this. And honestly, I don't do this for the money. I do this because I love you guys so much. Those of you who stuck with me all this time through all the bullshit I've been through, you're the reason that I'm here. I appreciate you guys so much, and I've actually spent a lot of time getting other jobs and helping others set up businesses for the sake of, making an income for myself separate from YouTube. And I'm also very arrogant when it comes to the idea of accepting a handout. I just won't do it. When I was in Seattle, I absolutely had to. I didn't have a choice. I wouldn't have been able to get chemotherapy had I not applied for everything else and allowed them to basically put me into the welfare system. But this very welfare system that we see is it's a huge problem for our government because the runaway spending has gotten terrifying. We're talking about in the hundreds of millions for each state, in a matter that varies from state to state, whether or not that state essentially votes correctly, or its politicians behave in a way that especially the Obama administration approved of. But now that we've covered what happened 6 months ago, let's talk about what's going on right now. Because our friend Donald Trump is willing to end welfare as Bill Clinton knows it. From the Associated Press, overhauling welfare is one of the defining goals of Bill Clinton's presidency, starting with a campaign promise to end welfare as we know it, which he did not, continuing with a bitter policy fight, and producing changes that remain hotly debated 20 years later. Now, President Donald Trump wants to put his stamp on the welfare system, apparently in favor of a more restrictive policy. You might think I'm against this, but I'm very much not. He says people are taking advantage of our system, and they absolutely are. Let's take Florida, for example. Let me just talk to you guys for a second about welfare in the state of Florida. It is much easier in the state of Florida to get welfare and assistance if you are an immigrant from Puerto Rico or Cuba than it is if you are a citizen of the United States. Now, when I say immigrant, don't presume I mean illegal immigrant, because Florida is an amazing place in the fact that there are a wealth of front-end businesses where an illegal immigrant, can walk in and speak in Spanish to a lawyer in order to have their illegal immigrant status basically just walked through until they become a legal immigrant. And in the process, these lawyers get them benefits, including Social Security insurance, which they shouldn't be entitled to because they don't pay into it. They haven't paid into it. They're fucking immigrants, for God's sakes. The only way they could pay into it is by becoming a citizen. And no, the money taken out of their taxes when they get jobs with corporations despite not being citizens does not actually count as them paying into the social insurance programs. Go look up the programs. That money is actually set aside separately for ICE and other immigration programs. It is infinitely easier for a healthy, able-bodied person who just doesn't want to work to get welfare than it is for a person who's, well, forgive me for tooting my own horn, but dying of cancer. The fight is a constant fight because so many people have abused this system for so long. And the system it's breaking down. It cannot sustain itself under the weight we've put on it. For nigh on a decade, this country has been terribly concerned about where Social Security is going because it can't afford to maintain people at the age of 55 anymore, which is why at the end of the Bush administration, we saw that age raised from 62. We saw the retirement age raised from 62 to 65, and that number is going to keep increasing whether or not it makes sense to. Eventually, we're going to reach a point in which, the only way you're going to be able to retire is if you've got fucking dementia. And that's a terrifying idea. That's an absolutely terrifying idea. That you would require, you essentially have to be dying to retire. Our country's in a terrible place right now. And I hate saying that because I love my country. I do. I love it a little bit more than all the other countries I love. France, Japan, Germany. I have a very warm place in my heart for Germany. Poland, Russia. Oh no, I'm such a bad American. I love Russia. But let's face it. Russia is probably our best ally right now. And we really have to do a good job of showing them we're not just wasting ourselves away. And we do that with not external actions, because externally Trump's doing amazingly. Our position in the quote-unquote war on terror, the proxy wars between Iran and Iraq, a subject we'll be getting to towards the end of the show, really does make me proud again to be an American. However, internally, with the Democrats, the DNC fighting with all its might to just condemn a president instead of work towards a better nation, well, what's the point in being an ally of the United States if it's just going to consume itself, is the question a lot of nations are asking. And that very position, that very question, is one of the reasons I have a segment on this show called Fuck China. Because everything we lose, we give to China. China picks it up and runs with it. Now, I will not be speaking on the subject of the 19th Communist Party Congress meeting in China this week. I'm waiting on that till next week because there's a lot of fucking information to go through, a lot of things to get together, and I'm probably going to be doing a special episode on that. However, suffice it to say, fuck China. Oh, back to the article. Trump, who has been signaling interest in this issue for some time, said in the past week that he wants to tackle the issue after the tax overhaul he is seeking by the end of the year. He said changes were desperately needed in our country and that his administration would soon offer plans. For now, the president has not offered details. Spokeswoman Sarah Huckabee Sanders said more specifics were likely early next year, but the groundwork has already begun at the White House, and Trump has made his interest known to Republican lawmakers. Paul Winfrey, Director of Budget Policy and Deputy Director of Trump's Domestic Policy Council, told a recent gathering at the Conservative Heritage Foundation that he and another staffer have been charged with working on a major welfare reform proposal. He said that they have drafted an executive order on the topic that would outline administration principles and direct agencies to come up with recommendations. The president really wants to lead on this, Winfrey said. He has delivered that message loud and clear to us. We've opened conversations with the leadership in Congress to let them know that this is the direction we are heading. Trump said in October that welfare was becoming a very, very big subject, and people are taking advantage of the system, which they absolutely are. Clinton ran in 1992 on a promise to change... Hold on. I want to cover this statement right quick. Becoming a very, very big subject, and people are taking advantage of the system. If you go out right now, today actually, after Trump made some statements today regarding his new tax program, the Washington Post, the New York Times, many news outlets began publishing the San Francisco Gate, which is a bastion of communist appeasement, went on tirades about college students requiring food stamps, without ever considering that these aren't the people who need that assistance the most. Our lowest 1% makes between $0 and $2,000 a year, and that is with benefits, that is with assistance. So, I mean, we're facing a problem where the amount of people, the percentage of people who are... LT, show your manners. LT, come here. Now. What'd I say?
Huh? It don't matter.
Come here.
I thought you were just leaving.
Come here.
No, I didn't want to run out.
Come here.
No, she won't run out. And if she does, she'll come back. You.
Sorry, just a moment.
I gotta look it up.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you, friend. Is that everything?
Alright, so, this very, very big subject that people are taking advantage of the system, I mean, Trump has had to, over the last year, slowly reduce how he talks about things. He has had to focus and, at the same time, be very general. He can't let anything leak. He can't use specific words, except on Twitter, of course. He has to be as general as possible and not let people know just what is going on in his, in his pocket, because anything that gets out, he gets attacked on, right? And that just slows down our entire country. So when he says this, he's being very vague. And that vagary does not capture the depth of just how large the food stamp and cash assistance receiving population has become. We're talking, of course, about, when I bring up college students, I want you to recognize that college students on the ladder of economics fall in about the 15%, the 15th percentile. That may not sound very high to you. However, that means that what started as assistance for the lowest 5 to 8% of the population has doubled in size in the last 20 years, and in the last year alone has gone up from, well, taking the University of California programs. The University of California has seen a 400% growth in food stamp receiving citizens in the last year alone. We're talking about, yes, immigrant families, minority families who certainly don't make a lot of money. The parents didn't go to college. However, these kids are completely eligible for food stamps as well as enormous grants, I need you not to... Can you...
I'm playing with her.
I know, I'm in the middle of a show.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
And, where was I? I'm sorry, my memory's really shit. Right, okay, so 400% growth. Last year, on average, the University of California, each of the 10 schools, had at most 75 people each receiving food stamps, whereas this year, we're into 500 per. That's 5,000 people in the University of California school system who are receiving benefits out of an approximate 100,000. That may not seem like a lot, however, it's 5%. And there was a time in California where that number was 1 or 2 students who received food stamps. We're talking not 20 years ago, but 5 years ago, when food stamps were just unheard of on college campuses in California. Now, that's not the case in every state. Florida, for example, has a much higher margin, which hasn't grown as much in the last few years. New York still doesn't see much in the way of food stamps in their universities. Texas actually hasn't changed much because they have additional requirements and rules. But what we're facing is more and more people who are not only eligible for grants, for scholarships, stipends, student loans, are supplementing those with government subsidies meant for the people in the worst of the worst positions, the people who can't feed themselves. And when you read these articles about food stamps in colleges, they're not spending their money on fucking bread and milk. They're spending it on, well, coffee, as California has removed that restriction. They're spending it on soda, and not like Coca-Cola. Sponsor me, bitches. Or, they're spending it on, like, energy drinks. Like fucking Red Bull. They are buying luxury items with food stamps and expecting the government to subsidize it. This is outright abuse of the system that we have in place, and it makes it a problem. I don't even give a fuck if I get food stamps or benefits from the state. I would much prefer not to. I would much prefer to be in a position where I'm paying for private insurance and buying my own food and managing myself. Because that's what we're supposed to do as Americans. Even if you fall from the loftiest heights to the bottom, the expectation, the cultural standard up until the last 10 years has been that you go out there and you just pick yourself up by the fucking bootstraps again. But that's not the case anymore. It is cultural at this point. No matter what happens, for people to say, well, why don't you go get food stamps? Well, why don't you go get... LT, I need you to go position. I need you to go chill. I know, you want to play, but you gotta stop. We'll play, we'll get you some dinner right after the show, don't you worry. Think of the stress that puts on an already difficult system. A system in which people who are at their worst are coming in and having to do multiple interviews in order to just prove that they don't make any money, to prove that they don't have the ability to feed themselves. Suddenly, you push that up by 400 people. That's 400 more people who are adding to the stack of paperwork that has to be done by the federal assistance programs, whether it's Department of Children and Families in Florida or Department of Health and Human Services in California, to work through. It blocks up the system, it slows everything down, and it causes harm to those who absolutely need it most. For example, I was living in a homeless housing facility in Seattle, right? Many of you who have been with me for the last 2 years remember back in the beginning when I didn't even have hair at that point after chemotherapy. And I did interviews with some of these people just to give you guys an idea of what it was like for the men there. And I had, you know, quite the stained and ugly little apartment, I won't deny it, and it was given to me by the state after having to fight for 2 years. And 2 years is the average. There are people who go 4 or 5 years homeless before they're ever able to get real assistance. This is a system that is strained to capacity, and it needs an overhaul. Let's get back to the article. Clinton ran in 1992 on a promise to change the system, but struggled to get consensus on a bill, with Democrats divided and Republicans pushing aggressive changes. 4 years later, he signed a law that replaced a federal entitlement with grants to the states, placed a time limit on how long families could get aid, and required recipients to go to work eventually. However, that work requirement has been whittled away to nothing, especially under the Obama administration. It has drawn criticism from some liberal quarters ever since. During her presidential campaign last year, Democrat Hillary Clinton faced activists who argued that the law fought for her by her president punished poor people, which it absolutely does. Catherine Eden, a professor at Johns Hopkins University. What did I tell you? What did I tell you, Elsie? I told you to go somewhere. Reste. Reste, mon chat. No. No. All the way. All the way. All the way. Reste. Catherine Eden, a professor at Johns Hopkins who has been studying welfare since the 1990s, says the law's legacy has been to limit the cash assistance available to the very poor and has never become a springboard to work, which it hasn't. There is nothing requiring path to work programs or volunteer programs, which has created a system in which people can continually reapply despite the time limit on their aid being added to them. She questioned what kinds of changes could be made, arguing that welfare benefits are minimal in many states and there is little evidence of fraud in other anti-poverty programs. There's a growing fraud in the last couple years. However, couple years, like the last 8-10 years. Still, Eden said that the welfare has never been popular even from its inception. It just doesn't sit well with Americans in general. Robert Rector, a senior research fellow at Heritage, said he would like to see more work requirements for a range of anti-poverty programs and stronger marriage incentives, as well as strategies to improve results for social programs and to limit waste. He said while the administration could make some adjustments through executive order, legislation will be required for any major change. This is a good system, he said. We just need to make the system better. Administration officials have already suggested they are eyeing anti-poverty programs. Trump's initial 2018 budget proposal, outlined in March, sought to sharply reduce the spending for Medicaid, food stamps, and student loan subsidies, among other programs. Budget Director Mick Mulvaney said of this year, "If you are on food stamps and you are able-bodied, you need to go to work." Which I completely fucking agree. I'm not even able-bodied. I mean, you can't tell with me sitting here, me moving my arms and the energetic way I speak, but I walk with a cane. I've been repeatedly put in a position where I couldn't walk and forced myself to learn to walk again, and at this point I still walk with a remarkably discomforting limp. I can't lift enough to work any sort of job a standard person would. The limitations that I have are extremely frustrating, and yet I push myself through them because there's just nothing else. If you give yourself this opportunity, if you take advantage of it, you eventually become dependent on the state and accept that you don't have to work. And that idea, from the bottom up, is part of the reason our country is doing so badly. We don't have enough people able-bodied, or even partially able-bodied, in the workforce because they think they can just ride along on food stamps, cash assistance, Social Security, and oftentimes student loans, another program that absolutely needs reform. Of course, this brings us to a problem that I'm probably going to be addressing more and more as the weeks go on, because as we get closer to the passing of this bill, we are going to see the left-dominated media shitting all over this budget proposal. And I would really, really like to see just what they actually intend to do to repair the welfare state that we've created. The welfare state that is slowly but surely destroying the heart, the love, the strength of the American people through dependence on subsidy and welfare. This, of course, brings... now that I've covered that, there's something I think everyone needs to... I mean, you guys must have heard about it. If you're watching Philip DeFranco or reading any news outlet recently... in fact, a lot of YouTubers have been discussing it. We are in the face of something that everyone's calling Adpocalypse 2.0, in which, especially yesterday, there was a lot of fear about, because people like Styx Hexenhammer and Mr. Repsion, a lot of people lost their YouTube accounts for a couple hours in the face of the brand new algorithm, an algorithm that is so overzealous and so broken that it serves only the purpose of promoting already large, high-funded, and highly investing companies. But this, of course, comes in relationship to what the media is describing as backlash after ads appeared near pedophile comments. From the Wall Street Journal, a never-ending source of hatred for YouTube, a fresh wave of advertisers suspended commercials on YouTube after their ads showed up next to videos that appeared to attract pedophile viewers. The backlash Friday was the latest over what critics say is the inability of YouTube owner Google and parent Alphabet Inc. to effectively police the video service and assure advertisers that their spots won't end up accompanying inappropriate or offensive content. However, honestly, I don't think YouTube should be policing YouTube. I think that the community does a pretty fucking good job of policing itself, and adding the strength of YouTube and Google making decisions about what is allowed and what isn't is only going to further erode the strength the platform has. I mean, for example, just a perfect example of this is just how useless YouTube streaming has become, especially for gamers. I'm currently streaming at 1080p 60. And for most of the show, my stream it took a good 15 minutes before my show actually was streaming at the right speed. And this is one of the many, many problems that YouTube has created by following a procedure of constantly running analysis on every video at every fucking moment, every stream at every fucking moment. And on the flip side, you can go anywhere on YouTube and find, well, as this article will show you, child abuse, sexual assaults, so many disgusting things, as well as outright crimes under copyright law. There are channels that exist entirely to stream 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, licensed television shows. And it's not like I'm saying I'm much better. I mean, I start my show every week, I start my show with a song that actively copyright strikes my channel. And I do this because, well, the copyright deadlock is a very effective way to make sure you're still not getting ads, or at least making sure no one can make money off of those ads if they still decide to put them up there. It's always coming in twos, if you notice. I always do two very different songs for the copyright claim. But we're reaching a point where everything about YouTube, its ugliest face, is coming to light. And I'm going to say this much. I believe in free speech. I don't care what they're doing. The problem arises when people figure out how to abuse the ever-growing algorithm in order to present this information to kids specifically, and then profit off of it from Google rather blatantly. And that's what this article is about. Big brand advertisers, including candy maker Mars Inc., sportswear firm Adidas AG, alcohol giant Diageo plc, and British satellite TV operator Sky plc, Now TV's subsidiary, Sky plc's Now TV subsidiary, said they had to stop advertising on YouTube. They responded after the Times of London reported that ads for those companies were popping up next to videos of young children, many of which drew lewd comments from viewers. And of course, it's important to recognize that as we read this article, we're talking about one enormous company going after another enormous company for impacting their advertising value. This isn't the Wall Street Journal or, fucking Times of London for that matter, saying this for the good of the people. They're saying it so that they can take advertising budgets back from YouTube and Google. What we're facing here has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with me, but we're the ones who are going to suffer the most through it. We're the ones who are going to lose the ability to make a profit off one of the largest programs, or one of the largest platforms for video sharing and streaming, because they want to punish, they want to punish each other. They don't even entirely care that the children who will be presented in this article later are under attack. You notice they don't give any details early on. No, they're here to punish YouTube directly, and they don't care who they take down with it, because we are all pawns in this very, very large farcical war between feudal, enormous companies. Other reports in the news and on social media have highlighted YouTube videos with millions of views that exploit children by putting them in compromising or predatory situations. A spokesman for YouTube said Friday that the video sharing service forbids videos and comments that sexualize or exploit children, and that the videos in question should never have displayed any ads. "We are working urgently to fix this," the spokesman said. The ad suspensions, hitting YouTube on Black Friday, the traditional kickoff for the holiday season, follows similar action by advertisers earlier this year. In March, for instance, companies, UK political companies, and government agencies pulled YouTube ads in what was called the Adpocalypse, after discovering they'd appeared before extremist or racist videos, following reports from the Times of London and the Wall Street Journal. I have given up entirely on ad revenue. That's why I would much rather use Patreon, Streamlabs, and of course, just, straight up care less about profiting off of this and instead share information with you pretty much wherever I can get it. Because at this point, this is not a profitable platform to be working from if you weren't making a profit before 2015. Skipping ahead a little bit, the Times of London reported that YouTube videos featuring young girls, in many cases apparently filming themselves, sometimes in underwear, drew hundreds of pedophiliac comments, including encouragement to do lewd acts and linked to child abuse content. The Times reported that the sites displayed recommendations for similar videos, such as a view of toddlers naked taking a bath. News Corp owns both the Times of London and the Wall Street Journal. That's kind of important to note, because we all know that Rupert Murdoch is not a big fan of YouTube. He has repeatedly attempted to challenge them, place copyrights, lawsuits on them, attack it for taking away his moneymaker, his ad revenue for services like the Wall Street Journal and Times of London. And I'm going to keep bringing this up because just about the rest of the show, up until we get to the terrorist attack in Egypt, which is coming at the end of the show, we're basically talking about giants, corporate giants, warring with each other, with us being their pawns, trying to move us to take sides. Well, I'm not going to take a side. I fucking hate YouTube, the YouTube Corporation. I hate Google, and I hate Wall Street Journal and the Times of London. But I'm also going to use them in order to spread information so long as I'm able. Google struggles to police YouTube because its cache of videos is too vast for humans to review, and software isn't able to detect much of the unsavory content on its own. And the latest twist to ill-placed ads only complicates such policing. Videos, if posted innocently, may not in and of themselves violate YouTube's terms of service. However, many comments posted by viewers clearly do. See, this is an amazing manipulation by the Wall Street Journal on the subject. Now, this story comes from, originally, BuzzFeed going through and showing the exact child exploitation that YouTube is using. Now, BuzzFeed, of course, is not owned by News Corp, is a separate company which basically profits off creating controversy in the exact same way that Rupert Murdoch goes out of his way to make political controversy for the sake of creating news. However, I have to give it to BuzzFeed. I have to give it to them for being first on the street to give us this information, because as you'll see as I scroll down, we are going to have a lot of disgusting fucking imagery, and it boils me to my fucking core. Across YouTube, an unsettling trend has emerged. Accounts are publishing disturbing and exploitative videos aimed at and starring children in compromising, predatory, or creepy situations, and racking up millions of views. How the fuck do they do it? Apparently I should just be abusing children if I want to make money, but no, I have morals. BuzzFeed News has found a number of videos, many of which appear to originate from Eastern Europe, that feature young children, often in revealing clothing, placed in vulnerable scenarios. In many instances, they're restrained with ropes and tape, and sometimes crying or in visible distress. In other videos, the children are kidnapped, or made to play doctor with an adult. The videos frequently include gross-out themes like injections, eating feces, or needles. Many come from YouTube verified channels and have tens of millions of views. Skipping ahead, in recent weeks, YouTube has faced criticism after reports about unsettling animated videos and bizarre content, which were aimed at children using family-friendly characters, some of which was not caught by the YouTube Kids filters. All of the videos reviewed by BuzzFeed News were live action, ostensibly set up by adults featuring children. Taken together, they make up a vast, disturbing, and wildly popular universe of videos that, until recently, existed and unmoderated by the platform. LT, I need you out of the kitchen. You know better than that. Come here. Come here. Come here and say hi. We got all these assholes trying to make money off the exploitation of children when I have the most beautiful dog in the world.
The best.
She's the best around. No one's ever gonna keep her down.
But she does need to stay out of the kitchen.
Yeah, go. Good position. Mon chat. Go in position. No, position.
I didn't have trash. I didn't like it.
In recent weeks, YouTube is skipping ahead, existed unmoderated by the platform. That appears to be changing. On Tuesday afternoon, BuzzFeed News contacted YouTube regarding a number of verified accounts, each with millions of subscribers, with hundreds of disturbing videos showing children in distress. As of Wednesday morning, all the videos provided by BuzzFeed News, as well as the accounts, were suspended for violating YouTube's rules. YouTube told BuzzFeed News that the deletions were part of a scheduled effort to combat this type of content, that some of the accounts and videos provided by BuzzFeed News were already scheduled to be purged. In the last week, we terminated over 50 channels and have removed thousands of videos under these guidelines, YouTube said in a statement. 50 channels. It's important to recognize there are over 7 million channels on YouTube, including abandoned channels, people who have set up multiple channels out of one account, etc. According to YouTube, the deletion, last week, the company terminated Toy Freaks, a massively popular account run by Greg Chisholm for videos that bordered on child abuse. The account featured videos of Chisholm's daughters screaming in fear, bathing, pretending to be babies, spitting up food, being force-fed, and peeing. The account had 8 million followers around the time YouTube shut it down. And yes, they do, Observer. Sorry I missed your message there, Observer, but yeah, they do use keywords like that in order to get past the kitty filter. This is a growing problem, using things like Peppa Pig, whatever her name was from the girls from Frozen. This is a huge...
Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man's another popular subject, especially because of his popularity due to the movies. And as these movies come out, we're going to see these characters being used for that same purpose. In a company blog post Wednesday afternoon, YouTube pledged to address the issue comprehensively by fixing gaps in its enforcement policy. Starting today, well, yesterday technically, the company is purging accounts that, like Toy Freaks, appear to show child endangerment. However, as we found out, lots of other channels were hit in this purge, including Styx Hexenhammer, Mr. Repsion, people who actively speak against this kind of shit. It is also age-restricting cartoons and animated videos that feature kid-friendly characters engaged in bizarre or adult situations. And we're gonna skip past some of this because it's mostly just covering the history of it, and most of you are familiar at this point if you've been following along of the kind of shit that's been going on. But I wanted to actually give you guys an idea of just how twisted this shit is and how easy it is for these people to get their shit viewed by children, no less. Here's a video of a scary killer clown forcibly shoving... Well, I say forcibly. There's certainly an element... I've watched a few of these videos, and I am not linking to them, especially because I don't want to have anything to do with them. But it's very clear that a lot of this stuff is done... These children are being manipulated. They believe by doing this, they get to be on the camera, they get to be stars. It's the Daddy of Five situation, but on a scale so large it makes me sick to think that so many people were obsessed with Daddy of Five, and yet ignoring the bigger problem back at the first Adpocalypse. A scary killer clown who shoved his son into a washing machine, and then you can see him cut away, and then the washing machine has a doll in there as it's spinning around, but it certainly looks like the child is still in the washing machine. And this is from a channel called Mr. Tisha. In addition, we have fake blood packets used with the parent performing dentistry on the child. Keywords including bad baby, with the adult having his face covered up, mind you. The child's face is shown, but the adult's face is always hidden from view. And being threatened with a belt or a whip sometimes. Another verified account, Lady Diana, featured similar disturbing videos. It was apparently run by a 12-year-old from Ukraine, which is completely untrue. You can hear an adult in the background of these videos discussing with them and talking to them. However, you never see the adult. You only see the girls, and you can tell that they're acting. But they've also been clearly put up to this. You can watch them bring their eyes up to a figure behind the camera, as if taking cues from someone else. This is outright child exploitation, and it boils me to my fucking core. The videos feature adults in frightening costumes, kidnapping, or mock torturing children. Here's another Lady Diana video in which Lady Diana puts on a Joker costume and kidnaps the daughter. A screaming child is held down while toothpaste is smeared on her face by a man in a Joker costume. We don't actually know it's a man. The costume is not very... the costume is not very telling, and I mean, well, look at me. I can bind my tits down and look like a guy with the best of them. It's also hard to tell from the hips. especially given they're Ukrainian, and Ukrainians tend to have slightly narrower hips. Similar accounts, like Lady Diana's, appear to be monetized. Multiple videos, including one called Naughty Elf, which had 8.9 million views, and included a still image of a young girl taped to a wall, include pre-roll advertisements. Naughty Elf with advertisements by Allstate. Bad Baby, Bloody Nose, Doc McStuffins gives needle and, from Toys to See. Giant Spider Girl Sleeping compilation from Madakens. And this is, of course, the recommendations, the up next and then recommendations section of the channel. Spider in Ear, Giant Spider Attacks Kids. Videos from less popular accounts are frequently more disturbing. A number of videos viewed by BuzzFeed News showed very young children playing doctor with an adult who exposed the upper parts of the child's buttocks in order to mock inject them with a syringe. Children pretending to eat feces out of a diaper, and children in bathing suits seemingly being abducted and held underwater until unconscious by adults. Perhaps most unsettling, however, are a series of webcam videos of young girls which, unlike the Toy Freaks style of videos, do not appear to be aimed at children. These videos come mostly from one-off accounts, showing young girls scantily clad, talking or singing in front of webcams. Some of these videos have millions of views and have been up for years. For example, this video was published in 2012 and features a young girl in just a nightgown. Like many videos in this genre, it features predatory comments. Now, I'm talking about this, in complete anger about the way that these people are exploiting these children. However, it's not that BuzzFeed and Wall Street Journal, any of these people actually have those children's best interests at mind. Have you noticed that none of these have talked about actually looking into and finding where these children are? No one's looked into how they can actually work to protect these children. They're instead trying to condemn YouTube's comments. Yeah, that's because they want money. They don't want to protect these children. These companies, News Corp, BuzzFeed Incorporated, they don't give a fuck about these exploited children. It's utterly fucking disturbing just how fucking broken this situation is. And that's because it's not about doing the right thing. It's just about censoring and controlling other groups. Just like our old friend, net neutrality. Now, this is the subject I've wanted to go into for some time, but I mean, it's a difficult subject to get into because it's a difficult subject to understand. The Federal Communications Commission in 2012 put laws in place, restrictions in place that prevent ISPs, internet service providers, from being able to essentially create a tiered payment system, limiting how much data a company could move. But this, of course, even back then, I was saying, was a complete farce, because what company would fuck themselves over by restricting access to Netflix or Hulu? What company would fuck themselves over by slowing down YouTube? No ISP would do that. Except, so when you talk about net neutrality, it's important to recognize what we're actually talking about is net corporate neutrality. The ability for corporations to do whatever they want on the internet, and governments to be unable to protect their own citizens in the process. Now, I'm not speaking for or against net neutrality here. I think the very name net neutrality is a fucking distraction. It hides the true nature of it. The nature of, as I was talking about with YouTube versus the Wall Street Journal, giants fighting against giants. Of course, these companies want you to think that net neutrality is a bad thing because it's bad for them. Or excuse me, repealing of net neutrality is a bad thing because it's bad for them. But you know what? That bad for them is also the only way we're ever going to see a free market on the internet, which we haven't seen in years ever again. From the Wall Street Journal, a place where democracy has already died. Shit, let me scoot this over a little bit so you guys can see the text. Sorry about that. FCC net neutrality process corrupted by fake comments and vanishing consumer complaints, officials say. As the Federal Communications Commission prepares to dismantle its net neutrality rules for internet providers, a mounting backlash from agency critics is zeroing in on what they say are thousands of fake or automated comments submitted to the FCC that unfairly skewed the policy-making process. Allegations about anomalies in the record are quickly becoming a central component of a campaign by online activists and some government officials to discredit the FCC's plan. The process the FCC has employed, wrote New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman this week in a letter to the FCC, has been corrupted by the fraudulent use of Americans' identities. For the past 6 months, Schneiderman continued, the New York Attorney General's office has been reviewing the comments filed at the FCC on net neutrality. It found that hundreds of thousands of submissions may have impersonated New York residents, a potential violation of state law. But, he said, the FCC has declined to provide further evidence that could help move the investigation forward, such as data logs and other information. Some consumers have complained in letters to the FCC that their own names or addresses, have been hijacked and used to submit false comments to the FCC that they did not support. Opponents of the FCC's plan have pointed to the bizarre appearance of comments submitted by people who are deceased. Public comments play an important role at the FCC, which typically solicits feedback from Americans, blah, 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 blah. Skipping forward. At its December 14th meeting, the FCC plans to repeal Obama-era regulations that aimed at ensuring all websites, large and small, are treated equally by internet providers. Some consumer groups fear that without the rules, internet providers could begin charging some websites or services more to reach their customers, regular internet users who may ultimately bear the cost of the new fees. This is, of course, utter bullshit and completely unnecessary because if you know anything about the market, there is no benefit to internet service providers to doing this. Any internet think about who the internet service providers are, first and foremost. Time Warner, Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, enormous fucking companies who have the money to pay for the bandwidth costs that they incur. Also, companies that have their own services that, do decently fine even with competition. Take HBO Go, for example. HBO Go is owned by the same company that owns Comcast, and yet somehow they're worried. Hell, Hulu is owned by the same company that owns Comcast, and yet somehow these companies are worried that they're going to get throttled. Only on the level of competition would it happen, and such things being done could be handled by antitrust laws. That is an antitrust case waiting to happen. We don't need net neutrality laws because we have antitrust laws that need to be exercised against these fucking monopolies and duopolies of the internet. They also say that internet providers could artificially speed up services they own or have relationships with, to the detriment of startups and small businesses. Also bullshit. For their part, broadband companies argue that the rules are overly strict and discourage network providers from investing in infrastructure upgrades, which they fucking do. These ISPs are enormous, but they can't actually perform any upgrades because they are at the mercy of these enormous corporations with which they're actually competing, and they shouldn't be competing. This is the internet, for fuck's sake. Such things work on an algamic level to where to where these giant corporations are held up and supported by the love and usage of their users. Their finances are built on the very structures of the internet. And with such strict rules in place, we are, especially the United States, is falling behind in being able to keep up. The only companies who are able to keep up, Verizon, for example, are so fucking powerful with their duopoly position that they have absolutely nothing to fear. They already have deals with Google. They already have deals with Netflix. And none of these concerns are going to do anything but bring these contracts into question again, which should happen in an open market. But we don't have an open market. But internet providers have also spent significant time and money lobbying for the regulations to be reversed, and some of the public comments, critics say, bear striking resemblance to industry talking points. It was particularly chilling to see these spam comments all in one place, as they are exactly the type of policy arguments and language you expect to see in industry comments on the proposed repeal, said Jeff Cow, a data scientist who published a study for the pro-repeal comments Thursday in a blog post. Like Schneiderman, Cow performed his own analysis of the net neutrality comment record. Using an algorithm to sort out duplicate entries, Cow said he was then able to apply another algorithm to identify the remaining comments that could be considered unique. Further analysis revealed that even some of the unique submissions shared common language and syntax, suggesting they weren't unique at all, but perhaps written by a computer program to appear superficially different. For example, one submission read, "Citizens, as opposed to Washington bureaucrats, should be empowered to buy whatever their products prefer." Another retained much the same format, but with certain words rearranged. "Individual citizens, as opposed to Washington bureaucrats, should be able to select which services they desire." While it is common for advocacy campaigns to recruit people to sign and submit form letters to the FCC, Cow said that those who supported keeping the rules were far more likely to write personal, heartfelt messages. Despite the polarizing nature of the policy fight, few commenters who supported the repeal were moved to develop their own original messages, an indication that Cow that many in the pro-repeal camp may have been bots or spam. They need to get out from behind their desks and computers and speak to the public differently, Rosenworcel said in a Los Angeles Times op-ed. The FCC needs to hold hearings around the country to get a better sense of how the public feels about the proposal. Calling the FCC comment system a mess, Rosenworcel added that some 50,000 consumers' complaints appear to have disappeared from the agency's records. She also highlighted a Government Accountability Office probe into an alleged denial of service attack that the FCC claimed prevented consumers from filing submissions on the net neutrality plan. It's all about Congress for right now. Focusing on fake comments may not prevent the FCC from repealing the rules next month, but some activists say raising the issue could prompt lawmakers to intervene and push for delaying the agency's vote. Short of that, said Evan Greer, campaign director for the advocacy group Fight for the Future, the furor over fake comments could benefit supporters of the rules in any legal challenge to the FCC's plan. It's all about Congress right now, said Greer, but this will absolutely show up in court if we get there. And of course, I'm going to keep saying it. All we're seeing here is giants fighting with giants and expecting us to do their dirty work. But citizens benefit nothing, and could even benefit greatly from the deregulation of the internet in this situation. As for what my position in the matter is, my position is very simple. I hate Google, and I also hate News Corp, and I also hate our Congress. and I don't want any of them having too much power over the citizens or their freedom of speech. But right now, there's barely any freedom of speech on the largest platforms on the internet. Twitter actively scours people's work off of Twitter. They aren't only monitoring Twitter, but everything else a person does online, using their spy tools. And I recommend getting a plugin for your browser or a browser that is built with privacy and blocking tracking software in mind. Because all this boils down to is, who is going to be getting more of your money? Is it the ISP or the corporation who wants to fuck over the middleman? Personally, I don't care. I'm going to be working on a better internet, a free internet, in my spare time. One that is disconnected and cares not for the interests of a few economic giants who have created monopolies in our country and need to have antitrust laws held against them. Otterkeen says in the chat, I think Mr. Repion said that the FCC had to fall as a club to get more powers for the consumer, and I completely agree, actually. That is right on the fucking nose. Good on you, Mr. Repsion. I haven't heard from him and I haven't watched his stuff in a while. I should definitely go back and watch it. But, I mean, I need to stand by this point because there's no bigger point I could make for most of the stories I've been covering tonight than the simple fact that the only people who benefit from net neutrality staying in place or being repealed are corporations. And citizens will not be impacted because, well, competition is an amazing thing, and we need to open the internet back up to competition. Net neutrality is, at best, an extension of Citizens United, and I am sick and tired of corporations being first-class citizens and actual humans being second-class citizens. There's one more story I really feel is important to cover tonight because I don't know if you guys have heard, this has been all over the news in some places, but not everywhere. However, there was a terror attack in northern Sinai in Egypt. 305 worshippers killed in a terror attack on a mosque in Egypt's northern Sinai. At least 305 were killed and 128 injured during Friday's prayers at North Sinai Mosque by gunmen belonging to the group Daesh, making it the deadliest terrorist attack in Egypt in recent memory. The victims, who were praying at Al-Rauda Mosque in Bir al-Abd city, included 27 children who were killed in the attack, Egypt's prosecutor general announced on Saturday. The prosecutor general said that, according to eyewitnesses, 25 to 30 gunmen in camouflage trousers and bearing the Daesh black flag rode up to the mosque in 5 SUVs and started shooting at worshippers. The gunmen, some of whom wore masks, attacked the mosque as the imam started the Friday sermon. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. Most of the terrorist attacks to take place in northern Sinai in recent years, which have mainly been against security forces, have been claimed by the Daesh-affiliated North Sinai-based group Ansar Bayt al-Maqdis. Now, there are some very specific words in this article that are very important to take into consideration. 5 SUVs, 25 to 30 gunmen, and of course, Daesh. Daesh being a derogatory term for ISIS, and in very many cases, a derogatory term for Sunni Muslims. What we're looking at here is yet another part of the constantly ongoing proxy wars between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia actually came out, I believe it was today, claiming that Ali Khamenei, the current imam of Iran, he likened him unto Hitler, which, you know, honestly, someone should have told him that's not a great idea. But he did, and in light of him purging and even killing his own cabinet members and Wahhabist priests, I don't think he's in a very good position to be calling people Hitler, because it is the both of them funding and investing in terrorist attacks and proxy wars between multiple nations. Egypt is in a strange position where it is currently run by very extreme individuals. However, with elections coming up, it is also able to possibly elect itself into a more free position. However, terrorist attacks like this, as they have since the Arab Spring, keep pulling it into a state of conflict. I recognize that most people don't have any compassion whatsoever, but I could give a fuck less what their religion was. 305 people died today for no reason other than to fulfill rich people's interests because they don't want to declare war on each other and have the US and Russia directly up their asses like a spiked dick ready to make it bleed. Because that's what we'd be. The US and Russia are the world police. Everyone talks about the US being it, but Russia is just as much world police right now, especially with their thumb on Iran and their amazing work in Syria. And I personally am disgusted to know that 300 people died in a situation which was clearly well funded, having SUVs, 25 to 30 guns, all with enough ammunition to mow down an entire mosque. Their religion may be completely disgusting. It may have been Muslim on Muslim violence. But these people were not criminals who died. These people were not enemy combatants who died. It just breaks my heart, and I felt like saying that. Which is why I left it for the end of the show, because I didn't want to depress everyone with it. That said, we are at the end of the show, so I'm going to take the time to thank all of you in the audience for all of your help and spending some time with me. Actually, an enormous show today with 17 people in the audience. Thank you all so very much. You are all so wonderful. A thank you to Arakeen Green Moon. A thank you to Observer. A thank you to Self-Healing Steambolt, Rick Sheck, Egregious Charles, oh I'm so glad to have you here, Kevin Berktula, Polish Gamer, I can't read Cyrillic very well, I apologize, Cube, Broadcaster Naniel, thank you all so much for showing up, for chatting in the chat, keeping things active, you're all the best, and until next time, good night and good luck. Mwah. Oh, Celtic Rune Singer, you as well. Thank you for stopping by.
When I was young, he was the talk of the town. He used to laugh at me, didn't want me around. You are a hero, could have found me alone. He said you wanna make it on your own. Nothing has been changed the same as yesterday. Long way so down, look around. It's a long way down, a long way down. Graduation day, you were ready to fly. You go in places, didn't say goodbye. Just wait, I'll show you. I'm gonna do my thing. I bet you're gonna love me, treat me like a queen. Nothing has changed, it's the same as yesterday. It's a long way from here to the stars. You begin. I'm the talk of the town.